Case of Matthew Misener, a tragic tale of love, loss, and betrayal. Matthew Gerald Misener was born on August 20, 1984, in Tucson, Arizona, to Raymond and Jean Misener. He grew up in a loving household with 5 siblings, surrounded by the warmth and kindness that defined his family. As a child, Matthew was described as shy and reserved, an introvert who preferred quiet moments over large crowds. Yet, those who took the time to know him discovered a kind and caring individual who could always be relied upon. Wrestling became a turning point in Matthew's life. It helped him break out of his shell and build confidence. After graduating high school, he attended Pima Community College, not for academics but to continue pursuing his passion for wrestling. In 2011, at the age of 26, Matthew met Georgina Mendoza, a 25-year-old woman whose personality contrasted sharply with his own. Where Matthew was reserved and introspective, Georgina was outgoing and vivacious. Their relationship seemed like a classic case of opposites attracting. However, their backgrounds were vastly different. While Matthew came from a stable and nurturing home, Georgina had endured a difficult childhood marked by her father's abuse toward her mother. Her parents divorced when she was just 2 years old, and her father eventually ended up in prison. Though her stepfather provided stability, Georgina struggled during her teenage years, experimenting heavily with drugs before finding sobriety at the age of 24. Determined to rebuild her life, Georgina embraced newfound clarity, until Matthew entered her world, becoming the knight in shining armor she believed she needed. The couple fell deeply in love, marrying in 2013. Shortly after, they began planning a future together, starting a family. When Georgina became pregnant, Matthew realized the weight of his responsibilities. To support his growing family, he accepted a job at the Morenci copper mine, located 3 hours north of Tucson. Relocating to Safford, Arizona, meant leaving behind everything familiar, including their families and friends. Despite the challenges of adjusting to a new town, Matthew remained committed to providing for his wife and unborn child. In 2014, Georgina gave birth prematurely to their first son, followed by a daughter a year later. By 2017, the couple welcomed their 3rd child, yet the pressures of parenthood and work began taking a toll. Exhaustion and frequent arguments strained their marriage, ultimately leading to divorce later that year. Though the split appeared amicable, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Custody battles became contentious, with Georgina frequently challenging the arrangement. Meanwhile, Matthew moved forward with his life, entering into a healthier relationship with Nicole, a coworker of mine. Engaged to be married in March 2020, Matthew seemed poised for happiness once again. But fate had other plans. On February 10, 2020, Matthew's life was tragically cut short when he was ambushed and murdered along a rural highway, a crime orchestrated by none other than his ex-wife, Georgina, and her accomplice, Eduardo Montano Jr. This is the story of how greed, manipulation, and betrayal culminated in one of the most shocking crimes of recent memory. Matthew Misener's life, while far from perfect, had all the makings of a fulfilling existence. He was a devoted father to his 3 children, a hard-working provider, and someone who genuinely cared about others. Friends and colleagues alike described him as the quintessential good guy, the type of person you'd want in your corner during tough times. His dedication to his family was unwavering, even when circumstances demanded immense personal sacrifice. For instance, moving away from Tucson to take a demanding job at the Morenci copper mine wasn't an easy decision, but Matthew saw it as necessary to secure a better future for his growing family. However, this picture-perfect image masked the cracks forming beneath the surface. Following the birth of their 3rd child, Matthew and Georgina found themselves overwhelmed by the demands of parenthood and financial strain. What began as minor disagreements escalated into heated arguments, creating a toxic environment within their home. The couple filed for divorce in late 2017, opting for shared custody of their children. Though outwardly cordial, tensions lingered. Georgina, unable to accept the custody agreement, consistently undermined Matthew's time with the kids, inserting herself into situations where she felt excluded or slighted. Despite these challenges, Matthew tried to remain level-headed and cooperative. He prioritized his children above all else, ensuring they felt loved and supported regardless of the fractured state of their parents' relationship. This commitment extended beyond familial duties. Matthew also made efforts to maintain civility with Georgina, believing that keeping peace would benefit everyone involved. Unfortunately, his goodwill went unreciprocated. Georgina's resentment festered, exacerbated by her deteriorating mental health and manipulative tendencies. Into this volatile mix stepped Nicole, Matthew's fiancée. Their budding romance brought renewed hope and joy to Matthew's life. Nicole encouraged him to stand firm against Georgina's unreasonable behavior, advocating for stricter enforcement of the custody agreement. This intervention inadvertently fueled Georgina's hostility, setting the stage for tragedy. Tensions reached a breaking point 6 months prior to Matthew's death when Georgina falsely claimed she had terminal cancer, using the fabricated diagnosis to deny Matthew visitation rights. Though CPS investigations debunked her allegations, the damage was done. Matthew's attempts to mediate only deepened Georgina's animosity, further entrenching her belief that eliminating him was the solution to her problems. 1. Thus, Matthew's seemingly idyllic life unraveled under the weight of unresolved conflicts and escalating hostilities. Little did he know, the events unfolding around him were precursors to a sinister plot, one that would rob him of his future and leave his family shattered. On the morning of February 10, 2020, Matthew Misener left his home in Safford, Arizona, bound for work at the Morenci copper mine. It was still dark outside, the early hour typical for miners commuting long distances to their jobs. At approximately 4 a.m., Matthew kissed Nicole goodbye and set off on the familiar route to the mine, unaware that this day would mark the final chapter of his life. As he drove along rural Highway 191, a desolate stretch of road winding through the Arizona desert, Matthew likely focused on the mundane details of his commute, the hum of the engine, the faint glow of the dashboard lights, and the endless expanse of empty highway ahead. He couldn't have known that danger lurked just beyond the horizon. At around 5 a.m., a local fire chief driving along the same highway approached Horseshoe Curve, a notorious bend in the road. There, he noticed something unusual. A black Chevrolet Tahoe pulled off to the side, its front end crumpled as though it had veered off the road. Concerned, the fire chief stopped to investigate. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. Inside the vehicle sat Matthew Misener, slumped over toward the passenger seat, unconscious and bleeding profusely from multiple gunshot wounds to the head. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the fire chief immediately called authorities. By the time detectives arrived, it was clear that Matthew was dead, his life stolen in a brutal act of violence. The crime scene painted a grim picture. Bullet holes riddled the driver's side of the Tahoe, shattering windows and piercing the metal frame. Investigators quickly ruled out a random accident. This was no ordinary crash. The precision and intent behind the shooting suggested premeditation. Medical examiners later confirmed that Matthew had been shot 3 times with a 9mm pistol, each bullet fired from close range. Adding to the mystery, not a single shell casing was recovered from the scene, an eerie indication that whoever committed the murder had meticulously cleaned up afterward. 1. For Matthew's loved ones, the news was devastating. Nicole, frantic after noticing Matthew's absence at work, returned to the site of the wreck only to find police cordoning off the area. Detectives broke the heartbreaking news to her. Matthew, the man she planned to marry in less than 2 months, was gone forever. Overwhelmed by grief, Nicole collapsed in tears, struggling to comprehend how such a senseless act of violence could happen to someone so kind-hearted. Detectives wasted no time launching an investigation. The remote location of the crime posed significant challenges, yet it also offered potential clues. Witnesses reported seeing a white sedan fleeing the scene shortly after hearing what sounded like gunshots. These accounts aligned with surveillance footage reviewed later, showing a suspicious vehicle making a U-turn near the crash site before speeding away. Combined with forensic evidence collected from the wreckage, investigators pieced together a chilling timeline of events. Someone had deliberately targeted Matthew, lying in wait along his usual commute route before executing a calculated ambush. As the investigation unfolded, one question loomed large: why? Who could harbor such malice toward a man universally regarded as gentle and dependable? Clues began pointing toward those closest to Matthew, his ex-wife Georgina and her alleged accomplice, Eduardo Montano Jr. The motive, rooted in jealousy, custody disputes, and manipulation, revealed a darker truth about human nature. What should have been a routine morning drive became the tragic culmination of simmering tensions and unchecked aggression. Matthew Misener's death left an indelible scar on everyone who knew him. From his devastated fiancée to his heartbroken family, the loss reverberated deeply. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt by his 3 young children, robbed not only of their father but also of the innocence that comes with believing the world is inherently safe. For them, February 10, 2020, will forever be remembered as the day their lives changed irrevocably, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be. Matthew Misener's death left an indelible scar on everyone who knew him. From his devastated fiancée to his heartbroken family, the loss reverberated deeply. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt by his 3 young children, robbed not only of their father but also of the innocence that comes with believing the world is inherently safe. For them, February 10, 2020, will forever be remembered as the day their lives changed irrevocably, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be. The initial stages of the investigation into Matthew Misener's murder were marked by urgency and determination. Detectives from the Clifton Police Department swiftly secured the crime scene, cordoning off the area to preserve evidence and ensure no critical details were overlooked. They meticulously combed through the wreckage of Matthew's car, searching for anything that might shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Broken glass, bullet fragments embedded in the doorframe, and blood spatter patterns told a harrowing story of a violent ambush. Yet, the absence of shell casings, a hallmark of professional cleanup, left investigators puzzled. Word spread quickly in the small community of Safford, where residents prided themselves on knowing their neighbors. Within hours, speculation swirled about the nature of the crime. Was it a random act of road rage? Or something more sinister? Detectives leaned toward the latter hypothesis based on the sheer number of bullet holes in the car, which suggested a deliberate attack rather than a spontaneous altercation. Suspicion naturally turned to those who stood to gain, or lose, the most from Matthew's demise. Nicole, Matthew's fiancée, became an immediate focus during the early stages of the investigation. Her arrival at the scene before authorities officially identified Matthew raised eyebrows. Detectives questioned her extensively, probing for inconsistencies in her account of the morning's events. Nicole explained that she had seen the crashed vehicle while driving to work and suspected it belonged to Matthew, given the similarity to his black Tahoe. Fearing the worst, she continued to work but soon realized Matthew hadn't shown up. Overwhelmed by dread, she returned to the site only to learn the devastating truth. While her explanation checked out, investigators retained skepticism, seizing her phone and vehicle for further analysis. Meanwhile, another lead emerged: Georgina Mendoza, Matthew's ex-wife. The custody battle between the former couple had grown increasingly contentious in recent months, with Georgina repeatedly attempting to undermine Matthew's parental rights. Just days before the murder, Matthew had filed for full custody, citing concerns about Georgina's mental health and fitness as a parent. The timing of this legal maneuver placed Georgina squarely under scrutiny. Detectives interviewed her at her mother's house, noting her erratic behavior and rehearsed demeanor. She claimed Matthew and Nicole were abusive, accusations already debunked by CPS investigations. Still, her emotional volatility and inconsistent statements left investigators uneasy. A breakthrough came when witnesses reported seeing a white sedan fleeing the crime scene. Nicole recalled an incident involving Georgina days earlier, during which a man photographed Matthew's car outside her residence. Recognizing the significance of this detail, Nicole provided detectives with the photo she'd saved on her phone. The license plate led investigators to Eduardo Montano Jr., whose connection to Georgina raised red flags. Eduardo's arrest on unrelated misdemeanor warrants allowed detectives to question him directly. Initially evasive, he admitted to knowing Georgina but denied any involvement in Matthew's death. However, discrepancies in his alibi and mounting circumstantial evidence, including the discovery of a 9mm Ruger pistol in his bedroom, tightened the net around him. Forensic testing confirmed the weapon matched the bullets recovered from Matthew's car, sealing Eduardo's role in the crime. Simultaneously, digital forensics teams analyzed Georgina's phone, uncovering incriminating text messages exchanged with Eduardo. These communications revealed a chilling conspiracy. Eduardo had been stalking Matthew in the days leading up to the murder, while Georgina instructed him to carry out the deed. Messages sent mere hours before the killing included explicit references to the impending custody hearing and Eduardo's promise to get it done. Together, these pieces formed a damning mosaic implicating both individuals in Matthew's death. By late February 2020, the case against Georgina and Eduardo solidified. Both were arrested and charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault. Their subsequent plea deal spared them a trial but ensured justice for Matthew Misener and his grieving family. Through meticulous detective work and cutting-edge technology, law enforcement unraveled a web of deceit and betrayal, bringing closure to a community shaken by tragedy. To understand the true nature of Matthew Misener's murder, one must delve into the tangled web of relationships and motivations that drove Georgina Mendoza and Eduardo Montano Jr. to conspire against him. At the heart of their actions lay a toxic blend of jealousy, manipulation, and desperation, a lethal combination that transformed simmering resentment into cold-blooded murder. Georgina's motive stemmed from a deep-seated need for control, particularly over her children. After her divorce from Matthew, she viewed the custody arrangement not as a compromise but as a constant affront to her authority. Her inability to accept shared parenting fueled a growing obsession with undermining Matthew at every turn. When Matthew announced his engagement to Nicole, Georgina perceived it as a direct threat to her influence over their children. Nicole's presence in Matthew's life symbolized stability and happiness, qualities Georgina feared she could never provide. Consumed by envy and insecurity, Georgina resolved to eliminate the source of her discontent, Matthew himself. Eduardo's involvement, while seemingly secondary, was equally sinister. Described as protective and possessive of Georgina, he harbored romantic feelings for her despite their failed dating attempt. Georgina exploited this dynamic, confiding in him about her struggles with Matthew and painting her ex-husband as an abusive figure who threatened her well-being. Whether Eduardo genuinely believed her claims or simply sought to prove his devotion remains unclear. What is evident, however, is that he willingly embraced the role of enforcer, agreeing to carry out the murder as a twisted demonstration of loyalty. Text messages between Georgina and Eduardo exposed the depth of their collusion. Days before the crime, Eduardo stalked Matthew's movements, ensuring he knew the exact route his victim would take to work. Georgina supplied crucial information, such as Nicole's address and vehicle description, enabling Eduardo to plan the ambush effectively. On the night of February 9, 2020, Georgina sent Eduardo a chilling directive: I've got my custody battle coming up, it better be done. This message, coupled with Eduardo's response asking whether he should notify her once the deed was complete, underscores the calculated nature of their partnership. Perhaps most disturbing is the casual manner in which they discussed the murder. Rather than expressing remorse, Georgina instructed Eduardo to let someone else break the news to her, reasoning that feigning shock would elicit a stronger emotional reaction. Such callousness reveals the extent to which both conspirators dehumanized Matthew, reducing him to an obstacle to be removed without regard for the consequences. Ultimately, Georgina and Eduardo's actions reflect a chilling intersection of personal vendettas and mutual dependency. Georgina manipulated Eduardo's desire to win her affection, while Eduardo leveraged the opportunity to assert dominance over a perceived rival. Together, they executed a plan rooted in selfishness and spite, leaving devastation in its wake. Their willingness to sacrifice morality for fleeting gain speaks volumes about the destructive power of unchecked ambition and misplaced loyalty. On November 2020, Georgina Mendoza and Eduardo Montano Jr. accepted plea deals, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault. Sentenced to 33 years and 9 months in prison each, their admissions of guilt brought a measure of closure to Matthew Misener's family, though the wounds inflicted by their betrayal ran deep. During sentencing hearings, Matthew's loved ones delivered powerful victim impact statements, recounting the void his death had left in their lives. His father, Raymond, spoke poignantly of the irreparable loss, saying, "What he was to us is impossible to describe. Now he's gone, and I'll never be able to hug him again." Meanwhile, Georgina's attempts to portray herself as a victim fell flat, undermined by damning evidence and her lack of genuine remorse. For Matthew's 3 children, the repercussions of their parents' choices will resonate throughout their lives. Not only have they lost their father, but they've also been deprived of a mother capable of nurturing them. The trauma of discovering that their own mother orchestrated their father's murder will undoubtedly shape their worldview, instilling mistrust and complicating their ability to form healthy relationships. Psychologists emphasize the importance of providing these children with consistent support and therapy to navigate the complex emotions stemming from such profound betrayal. The case of Matthew Misener serves as a sobering reminder of the fragility of human connections and the devastating consequences of unchecked hatred. It underscores the need for greater awareness of domestic conflict resolution and mental health resources, particularly in cases involving custody disputes. By addressing underlying issues proactively, communities can prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Matthew's legacy, though marred by tragedy, remains a testament to kindness, resilience, and the enduring bonds of family.